All right, good evening. Hi, my name is Teo. I'm the medical lead for HS in the US at UCB. UCB is a global biopharmaceutical company, and our ambition is really to help transform the lives of people living with severe diseases. And we do this by putting patients at the center of everything we do. We have been extremely lucky to be involved with great partners in hidradenitis suppurativa research and education. We know the amazing energy that is created when a group of HS advocates come together. So I'm extremely delighted to welcome you to the Spotlight HS conference session on connecting with other HS patients, where you will hear from two amazing women, Athena Gierbolini and Brindley Brooks, on how they've been really pioneering all that great work for those living with hidradenitis suppurativa. So I'll hand it over to them.
Hi, guys. Thank you guys so much for having us today. I know Athena and I are both excited to have the opportunity to talk with you guys, and we're going to talk about how you connect with other HS patients and the difference that that can make for you. So we're going to start off with the number one thing that you need to know, and that is that your HS is not your fault. This has nothing to do with anything you're doing to keep this happening, what you are or are not doing. It's a medical condition. It should be treated as such and talked about just that way. So please, if you take anything away from today, please take away that your HS is not your fault.
That's right, Brindley. We also want to tell you guys and stress that it is important and a reminder that we often tend to internalize our HS and blame ourselves, that we're afraid to ask for help because we've been conditioned to believe that this disease is a burden that we've brought on ourselves, and we often don't want to involve others in that burden. You know, inherently, we're caretakers. We're programmed to help others, and oftentimes we struggle to ask for help, and the same goes for men.
And having the courage to ask for help can be a really difficult thing for us because we are kind of set up so that we keep our burden to ourselves and do not try to involve others in that. And unfortunately, that usually just backfires on us the later in life that we go. So we are encouraging everyone to, although it may be hard, to speak up, to ask for help, to let people know how this condition impacts you and the ways that they can make a difference in your life by helping you.
So, what do we mean when we say support? There are many different types of support, and they can include emotional and mental support, educational support, and physical support. We're going to break down what those mean, but I want to stress Brindley's point and encourage you guys to not be afraid to ask for help or support. So for emotional and mental support, we have Facebook groups and we have support groups. And what are the differences between them? So Facebook groups, there are a couple of them. They're all private. Please make sure when you're joining one that the privacy settings are set to private so that nobody can see that you're a member and nobody can see that you're posting from outside. Like, you know, it's just you. So none of your friends or family will see what you're posting on Facebook groups. Many of our support groups online have these privacy settings so that you are in a confidential space. These groups also have a vetting process so that only patients and caretakers can join. And so you don't have outside people in there. These groups have thousands of patients. You'd be so surprised at how large the online community is. And they are all just like you and seeking support. So those are the online support groups. And then we have actual support groups, and they are facilitated by wonderful organizations such as Hope for HS, and there's also Hidradenitis and Me. We both do virtual support groups. Hope for HS has a couple of chapters that actually meet in person, but after the pandemic, we've gone mostly to virtual. And so I'm going to walk you through what you can expect to find in a support group if you're interested in attending one. And the first thing I want to mention to you is that with our support groups, as well as Hidradenitis and Me, privacy is of the utmost importance, and confidentiality is as well. So, I was really hesitant to go to my first support group, and I found it just so amazing to connect to other patients. But now that we're virtual, it's even more helpful for your first meeting. You don't have to be on camera. You don't even have to speak if you don't want to. If you just want to log in and kind of silently see what they're all about before actually participating, that's perfectly fine. If you're afraid to vocalize anything, you can drop comments in the chat. For Hope for HS, all of our meetings have an HS specialist that attend. You can ask general questions about HS. So if you're dying to know about, recent surgery updates or medicine updates, there's always a specialist to ask those questions. But most importantly, the one-on-one peer support from our amazing community is what draws me in every time. Hearing that you are not alone and that there are others going through the same journey with you is so amazing. So that's the emotional and mental support. I'm going to turn it back to Brindley because she's going to cover the physical and the educational support, most of which HS Connect provides.
So thank you. And we refer everybody to Hidradenitis and Me and Hope for HS as far as support group goes. And on HS Connect, there is a list of support groups and Facebook pages and Facebook groups that you can join as well under support. So we do have everybody listed on there also. And as far as the physical day-to-day support, what that looks like for most of us could include doctor appointments, helping your spouse do up their bra. I mean, how many of us have had an armpit flare where we have desperately needed some assistance getting dressed, or even doing things like doing up your bra, caring for the kids, brushing your hair can sometimes be a real challenge, especially with armpit flares, getting mugs or cups from the cupboard. All of these are day-to-day things that most of us take for granted and don't realize how difficult it can be when we do have flares or when our HS is active and that we do need help. Moving laundry, making dinner. I mean, even sitting sometimes can be a real chore. And so in order to ask for that physical help that we need, this is where you end up having to have the tough conversations with people about your HS in order to be heard and seen and to get the help that you need. I think a lot of people tend to avoid the tough conversations. Well, it's in the name because they're tough. But I think that what happens with that is that we end up doing ourselves a disservice by not telling people what we need from them and instead making them guess. So I know that this has been an issue for me personally in my life, with not wanting to tell people about my HS and then not also wanting to tell, like my husband, for instance, when I'm in pain and when I'm struggling. So he put it to me a different way that made me think about it differently. And he said, if I'm not feeling well, do you not want me to tell you because you want to help me to try to feel better, correct? And I was like, well, yes, of course. And he said, then why would your HS be any different than that? And it totally changed the way that I thought about it, because instead of hiding my pain and trying to cover up the fact that I get really grumpy when I'm in pain, I now just say to him that I'm struggling and that I need his assistance. And it's completely changed the interaction between us. And I don't feel like a burden anymore because I'm able to articulate what I need. So I think if you think about it as in terms of a medical condition instead of a burden, it does help to kind of reform and reshape the way that you think about your HS, because you would want your spouse or your partner or your child or your friend to tell you if they were struggling as well, so that you could do what you could do to help them. So once the tough conversations are had and you're more out about your HS, life seems to change. The first thing you may notice is that you know a lot of people that have HS. As soon as I started talking about my HS, people came out of the woodwork. There were like 3 people that I knew from a very small work group that had HS. So it's not rare. It's just rarely talked about because it's not cute. Like, we don't want to talk about these kinds of things. They're really difficult for us and they affect us in some really personal areas. So it's not something that would typically come up in daily conversation, but it should. And that's what we can do to change that. The feeling of weight being lifted from your shoulders from carrying that secret of HS is so heavy. And the weight that you feel once you're out about talking about your HS and helping other people understand and explain it to them is like nothing I've ever experienced. The sense of shame that we tend to have starts to dissipate. Then the understanding of the condition can begin for other people. And part of that is us educating them. It opens the lines of communication. You have kind of a free pass now to ask for what you need and to not feel guilty about that. It may help make sense of your actions for the other person. I mean, think about it if you were the other person and someone's consistently canceling on you, or all of a sudden isn't able to, or always isn't feeling well. I'm sure at some point people are taking that pretty personally. And this may help explain all of those things to that other person. It also allows others to support, help, and care for you. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm able to help care for someone, it makes me feel so good that I was able to just do something for them to make them feel better. And we're kind of robbing people of that experience by not allowing them to do the same for us. Your world grows exponentially. Once you have people that you know that also have HS, it's amazing to see how much wider your world can get, how much more educated you can become on your disease, what options you have, how to care for yourself. I mean, all of these things we've done for so long on our own, and knowing that there's an entire group of people out there is life-changing. And it also helps pave the way for those behind us or who aren't able or ready to speak out about their HS yet, make it a better place and a more comfortable place and an accepting place for them to do that. And that is our goal. And as far as support options go, like I had mentioned before, there are quite a few different options for support where you can go to get online support and support group options. The main two support group options would be, like we've said, Hope for HS and Hidradenitis in Me in Canada. Although they're Canadian, because they're Canadian, they welcome anyone into their group. So you don't have to be a Canadian in order to join. And there's all of these other groups that also can be found, again, on hsconnect.org/support with direct links to them as well. So if you want to go and check them out, please do. They are wonderful organizations, and everybody is really, really kind. So if there's any fear whatsoever, please let go of that fear, because these people are wonderful to deal with. And we just wanted to follow up today with the last thing is you're seen, you're heard, you're validated, and you're worthy. Everybody has a place here. Everybody has a story, and all of our stories are valid. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind. Just because you may not have had a tough go of getting a 7-year diagnosis, or 7 years to a diagnosis, doesn't mean that your story is any less valid than anyone else's. So those are the kinds of things we want everyone to keep in mind as we're going through this. And Athena, I just wanted to kind of go back to the how to have those tough conversations, and just, see if you had any feedback on ways to bring that up or how to have those tough conversations with people.
Yeah. So recently, Jenny Shao's chapter in California of Hope for HS, we recently just did a whole presentation on this, because it's one of the most commonly asked questions that we have in the community is, how do I tell people, right, that I have this condition? It's really tough inherently when we start to think about, how do I describe it to people? How do I explain it to people? And the overarching theme in this presentation and remembering when to tell people is that, first of all, it's your body. You get to decide how much or how little information you decide to disclose, right? You don't owe people any sort of explanation that goes in depth. I think innately people are curious about the things that they don't know, so be prepared to answer questions, but you can always politely say, I'm really uncomfortable going into those kind of details. Let's just start with this, and maybe as we progress, I can explain. But I always present this to people as a medical condition. First and foremost, it deserves the attention of a medical condition. It deserves to be treated and acknowledged as a medical condition. So please utilize your resources like the HS Foundation, like HS Connect, to get as much information as possible about this disease. It will not only help you, but it will help you explain it to other people. Using your words right, really trying to explain to people that it's like an autoinflammatory or autoimmune condition that makes your body have a response and that it puts you in pain. You don't have to go into details if you don't want to about where it occurs on your body, what exactly happens. You can be as broad as, I have flares and they cause me immeasurable pain. I think it's more important with people to emphasize the human aspect of this rather than trying to actually describe it sometimes in detail, right? So an example would be, I have this autoinflammatory skin disease, and when it flares, it knocks me down, right? I can barely sit. Sometimes I can't lift my arms. I have a hard time getting dressed. And then you can have conversations, like you don't have to like lay everything out on the table. So you could start with something like this, and then in further conversations down the road, then maybe get into detail. But it doesn't have to be, one giant conversation. But again, back to my original point, you don't have to tell anyone anything that is beyond your comfort zone because it's your body and your story.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. And I think, obviously you have different versions of how deep you want to go for the level of people in your life. Your work people may or may not be on an inner level that other people aren't. Right. Your family may get a different version because of how close they are to you, or, things like that. And it's completely up to you how much you do want to tell people about your HS. I do think that most people are usually surprised by the response that they get. I think we internally have made ourselves feel so burdened and disgusted by our own disease that we put that out to other people as well. And I think that a lot of times you can be very surprised by the response from other people when you do talk to them about your condition and how understanding and empathetic they are. So it may be a risk, weigh that risk depending on the people that you're going to talk to, and then free yourself of that, because it is a medical condition and it should be talked about just as easily and roll off the tongue, just like diabetes or hypertension does. And so we're working really hard to change that with our advocacy. And it's a really nice thing to see that we're starting to make a dent. And it takes people to have courage to do that. And it doesn't matter if you tell one person or 10, the weight still feels lifted off of you. So if you've been considering talking to people about it, maybe practice it yourself. Maybe attend a support group and ask for help on how you can say that and how you can talk to people about it. I think a lot of different people have different stories. I know another issue that comes up quite frequently is like when you're dating, how do you tell someone? When do you tell someone about your HS? And we see that happen all the time too. And that goes in line exactly with what Athena said. It's up to you as to when you do that. If you're moving along in a relationship with someone, at some point, they're going to find out anyway. So do you preempt that, or do you wait until that happens and not give them potentially a chance to understand what's going on? But those are decisions only you can make. And I did really like some of the comments that I saw, like Becky said that, when she has issues, she can pay her nephews or bribe them for help. So anybody reach out to Becky if you need her nephews to come and help you, and have $5 bills ready, apparently. And then I think, Candace had mentioned too in the comments I just saw that even when you explain to HS to other people, that they still don't understand the severity. And Athena, what do you think about that?
So I think that's going to come down to two things. First of all, it's going to involve layering, like I said, and just helping to gradually explain to them. And then also, there are some great resources out there. Again, I would refer them to the HS Foundation or HS Connect, because I think it's important for them to help understand not the legitimacy of this disease, but that it actually is a medical condition and that there are dedicated resources out there to educating the public. We had in this presentation that we had done for HS, kind of gone over some of the words that we like to use and some of the words that are just personal preference and what not to use. None of that at the end of the day matters, though, because it's you and your body. So I have words that I personally don't care to use when I'm describing HS, but if someone that's just more comfortable in their dialogue, I don't ever want to tell a patient not to use it. Brindley, do you feel the same? Do you have certain words that maybe you don't care to use when you're describing HS and certain words that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in our house, we use the word owie because I have two daughters, 16 and 20, who both have HS as well. And the word, abscess or lesion just sounds very clinical. And the way we've kind of figured it out, when my daughter was younger and I was having flares, I would call them owies. Well, now she has HS, unfortunately. Both of them do, my bio daughter and my stepdaughter. And so we figured we just continued with the use of the word owie because there's a connotation of compassion and empathy that comes with that. And it's easier for her to articulate and say when she's having, a flare. So we've just continued with that. And I think you're right. There's picking words really is helpful to either use or not to use. And then I think as far as people understanding the pain, I don't think we can expect other people to understand the pain or what it's like for us to live with HS. I don't think on their worst day that they could understand what the pain is like to live with HS, with the unpredictability and all of those other things. So I think having an expectation for somebody to understand that is really unrealistic. And as many times as I've tried to explain it to people, it's never enough. And I just don't think they're going to be able to understand. So I think at some point we kind of need to give up on the idea that we're going to be able to convey to them just how much this hurts. It's also a difficult disease because you can be down for one day, like down, and then the next day, if your abscess is ruptured and you're like, okay, I'm a new woman. It's hard to understand, I think, for people who don't have HS, how you go from one extreme to another. So these are the kinds of things that from an outside perspective, you would be like, that's interesting. But knowing HS, that's the usual thing for us. So those kinds of things are difficult to explain to other people, I think. And it's something that's really interesting. And I hope that we're going to see more change in that as we get the word out and that people understand more about HS in general. And then I see Candace and Bree were talking with Anthony about it's just a boil. What's the big deal? And yes, that is exactly what we're just talking about now, as far as acknowledging that they're not boils. It's a skin condition. It's horribly painful, as we all know, and it comes out of nowhere. So it's a really good thing to talk about with other people and help them understand as much as they possibly can what the condition is.
Brindley, boil is one of the words that I do not use when talking about my HS. I understand, like I said, that it's so easy to associate boil and HS. They certainly look and present like this, but I think the primary difference between a boil and HS is that what happens with your HS is the result of a disease, right? The result of a medical condition, and a boil is not. And so I think when we're describing HS to people, boil comes to mind and it takes them down a different path and almost away from the medical condition, disease state that we're trying to help them explain. My other word, and this is the only one, I have a whole list, is the word pus. Again, it just has certain connotations with it. People generally associate it with infection, and that's something that HS is not. And it starts to draw certain images in their head. And like, your boss doesn't need to have those images in your head. Your friends and family don't need to have those images in your head. And so a great alternative word that I use for pus is drainage, because bones drain. And that again refers them back to medical condition, disease state. But like I said, this is your body, your story. And if these are words that you are comfortable using, they're just my preference. And I'm sure all of the advocates out there have a whole list of what we call like ick words, like words we just don't care to use.
Yeah, and I agree 100% on boil. And, we understand from social listening that boil is the number one term that people use when describing HS, because there are similarities, but HS is not boils. And so we've changed that, understanding the social listening piece of it. So we typically will approach it with a boil-like abscess, because they really are abscesses. They're also not cysts. And that's a completely different dermatologic condition than HS as well. So although these things don't sound like they're that important, they really are for accuracy's sake. If you go to the dermatologist and you say that you keep having cysts, they're going to be looking for something different than what you're presenting with potentially as HS. And the same thing with boils. So if you change that vernacular even just slightly to say boil-like abscess, then you're moving in the right direction, kind of more towards what HS truly is. So I think it is important, and vernacular is important, and it's also very confusing because there are so many different words that can be used to describe nodules, pustules. I mean, there's an endless amount of terminology that comes with HS, and like everything else, most of it has acronyms as well, which is so nice. And then I think we love our acronyms. Alexander had asked, is HS hereditary? I asked because my father had it undiagnosed. I self-diagnosed and had it confirmed. Now my 9-year-old is showing signs in his underarms. So there is an approximate 33% familial link with HS. There is a lot more research that needs to be done on this area so that we can truly determine what's going on. But yes, it is not uncommon. And it's also not uncommon for families, like if one person has HS and finally comes out about their HS, to learn that other people in your family also had HS. They just never talked about it or didn't know that they actually had it. That was the case in my stepdaughter's family, that her mother had HS and her grandfather had HS, and they just never knew really what it was and never talked about it. So now she better understands that as well. So that's a really good question. Anything to add on that?
No. I come from an ethnic family, and so we don't speak. If anyone in any one of my side of the family has it, I wouldn't know, because even, we all live across the globe, and so we don't actually get to talk a whole lot. And even if we were to broach that conversation and I were to be the one to come out and say that I have this disease, I don't know that anyone in my family would. And I think that speaks to a lot of particular cultures and ethnic families, that they just don't talk about this. And so it's kind of going to be like my generation and my family, right, to kind of break that cycle with it. And Brindley, it sounds like it's the same thing, right, with you. That somebody, just kind of has to break the cycle with it and say, this is what I have. But it's amazing that once you finally vocalize that, how many people, like I've been out having dinner and drinks with girlfriends that I've known for years, and I finally have the bravery and courage to say something, and they're like, oh my God, this is what's been going on with me too. You'd be so pleasantly surprised at how well. A great place to start is the support groups, but next, like your girlfriends or your close friends are incredibly understanding. And I think once you tell someone for the first time and you see how well it's received, it's almost like a snowball effect, because it really gives you that confidence. It's always a lot easier. I know, Brindley, you and I talked about it this weekend a little bit, about how when we either do it face-to-face or sometimes over the phone, because we humanize this condition. Like they actually have to look at us in the eye. They're not behind the keyboard. They can't be keyboard warriors, as we call them. We bring the real aspect of living to this disease when we talk about it face-to-face or even on the phone.
Yes, absolutely. And Shelby asked, I don't like to burden people with the stuff I'm dealing with because they may not tell me what they're going through. Do you have any recommendations to get out of the suffering in silence mindset?
I'll start with this one. I would encourage you to either attend a support group or start on Facebook in one of these private groups. And then we had talked earlier, I felt the same way in the beginning, right? For years, I had a really sick husband, and he had major health issues that would unfortunately lead to his passing. And so I inherently, right, never talked about what I was going through with him because he was already going through enough and I was his caretaker and I didn't want him to take on any more than he already had. And so I didn't ever want to burden him with that. And as women, we're just so prone to being caretakers. It's hard to put this on other people. But once we lift that burden off of ourselves, we feel so much lighter about it. And really, even if they don't tell you what they're going through, it's okay. But they might be inspired by you being so brave to open up, that maybe not in that moment, but eventually, like when they see the courage that you show, that they might open up, maybe not even to you, maybe to somebody else. But yeah, I get it. We are definitely in this mode of, I don't talk about it, I just deal with it. Like years ago, I used to call this disease the suck it up disease. You'd go to the doctor and they would tell you just to suck it up. We got really conditioned to just not say anything about it. So it's super easy to go into this, I just deal with it. But really, it's so incredibly empowering. I'm sure I speak for Brindley and myself when I say this is, one of the best things about being an advocate is not only getting to tell our story, but encouraging others to tell theirs. Brindley, do you have anything to add?
I think that I completely understand what you're saying, Shelby. I feel like in some ways, you being able to tell someone that you're suffering and ask them for help, or just to express to them what's going on with you, sometimes it actually works the opposite way, because now you have a more open relationship with that person. So instead of them not wanting to burden you, so to speak, I often find myself asking my friends, like, no, if I'm having a rough day or a really bad flare, like, tell me something to take my mind off of it, because I'm sitting in my own, universe right now. And I really want to know what's going on in your life. So I think sometimes it actually has the opposite effect of what you would think. And it's also okay to not be able to take on someone else's stuff someday. You may be able to say, like, I can't do this today, but, tomorrow, if I'm having a better day, I'm all ears. And it's okay to protect your own mental health and well-being that way too. We don't always have to be available for everyone at every moment. So please keep that in mind, that you do have to protect your mental health as well. And then Bree asks here, quick question. There are times when HS destroys me physically and mentally, and even talking to other people doesn't help. How do you all work with this? Any tips for mental health during the times of flare-ups? I'll start with this one. I work full-time. I have adapted. I sit on a butt pillow at work. I have one at home in my home office. I have one at my office if I'm in the office. It can be difficult to work with. I wish that I would have taken more time and given myself some more grace when I was younger to not work through the harder ones and to allow myself some room and some space for that. But I think it's a mindset thing. And I'm not saying that you do not have a strong mindset. It really depends on the flare, and being kind and gentle to yourself and knowing when you need to just call that is a really important thing.
Yeah, I think giving the legitimacy to this condition that it deserves is the first step. You have a medical condition that flares and causes a severe disruption in your life. It's physically and emotionally draining. And if you had any other medical condition, you would be doing the same. So please remember that your body is going through something and we have to give it the grace. But I'm also going to put on my MBA hat here for a minute and remind you that if you are working during this and all you have to do is go to your HR department with a doctor's note or ask them what the procedures are, and you can ask for special accommodation for this disease. So if you have a hard time sitting, they might be able to get you like a pop-out desk so that you can stand. They might allow for, extra time to walk around or there are certain accommodations that HS patients can get. You can work with your dermatologist about crafting that letter. But getting back to the point we keep emphasizing, it's a medical disease. And so if working with it is tough, but you have every right to ask for help at work with it.
Yeah, and don't forget about FMLA too if you qualify for that. You can have intermittent FMLA and take time off of work as you need it for doctor's appointments, or even just if you're having a really rough day. So there are a lot of options if you qualify for them. So I would just talk to your HR department and ask them about it. And sometimes even just talking with your doctor or your boss. You don't even necessarily have to go all the way up to HR. So definitely keep that in mind. And I think we're out of time.
I think we are. This has been so great.
Thank you guys so much. Please reach out to either of us, Hope for HS or HS Connect, and we would be happy to chat further if you want. So thank you all for attending. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.